Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. My name is Justin Young. This is episode 45 for May 11th, Thursday, May 11th. Ooh, we're doing it on a weird day, 2023. Yeah, shocking. It is finals week, so we're having to mix things up a little bit here. But joining me are OJ Duncan and Alicia Utecht. How are y'all doing?
I'm doing well. So on Tuesday, I defended my prospectus. So I'm very, very happy to be there.
Yeah, I guess I messed up. I should have introduced you as OJ Duncan, comma, ABD, all but dissertation.
Yeah. So for people who may not know what the what the process is, so you do prelims and then you become a PhD candidate, and then you do a prospectus, which is essentially like saying, hey, this is what I'm going to research for my dissertation. And then once you defend that for your committee, then you become ABD, also known as all but dissertation. Some people get stuck there and are in ABD for a very, very, very long time. I'm not planning to be there for a very long time. I'm hoping to be you. Yeah, I'm hoping to be out of it within a year. I'm moving pretty fast through the program myself. Anyway, so I'm probably going to be done by the end of the fourth year, whereas the end of 4 or 5 years is where people usually finish. So I'm feeling pretty good about my progress.
As you should. You're rocking it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you should feel good.
Thank you.
I mean, you are making consistent progress, and you're not stumbling like big stumbles or anything. And like, you should feel good about that. It's an accomplishment. And I mean, a big part of doing a terminal degree is just being able to stick with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
The number one traits of people who have PhDs, stubbornness.
Yeah, some amount of persistence, right? Like, and that's a valuable quality to have in academia.
In anything, really.
I got some good feedback. I got hard questions, and I was expecting hard questions, but I was expecting different kinds of hard questions. So I was prepared. So what happens is
Like they were asking you the capital of Oklahoma.
Yes.
Like,
Yes,
that was not
I
expecting
had to list
that.
all 50 capitals in alphabetical order.
All 50 states I could do. All
Yeah.
50 capitals, I don't think.
Yeah. But yeah, and so I was ready. The way that it's set up is you do a 5 to 10 minute presentation, and then your committee asks questions, and then you leave and then come back. And then they say, hey, you passed, or, oh, no, you did not. And so I got ready for questions about my method. I got ready for questions about my theory. But then I got a question like, so why are you doing this? Like asking me specifically about the project. And I was like, I didn't prepare for this. And like I knew personal reasons that I wanted to do it, which is what they wanted to hear. But I started panicking, thinking I'm in academia. I need to figure out theoretical reasons why I'm doing this. So I just kind of sat there like, for 2 minutes.
Well, there's a gap in the research.
Well, I said that, and they were like, well, of course there's.
Filled.
Yeah. Yeah. I even had the fancy word lacuna ready to go, and I didn't use it.
What does lacuna mean?
So a lacuna is a gap in the research, essentially.
Oh. I learned something new. I get to go back to bed.
Yeah, yeah. But I didn't even use it. I was ready to say lacuna, and I didn't. I said gaps in research.
Points off.
Yeah.
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 You barely scraped by because you didn't use lacuna.
Yeah. But yeah, so I got some good feedback. I'm making some changes and moving forward. Next, I get to go in front of the Human Research Board and send my research. Yeah, and then do my research and then write, and then I'm done. So
Yeah, for those listening, IRB is Institutional Review Board. It's the idea that at research institutions, any sort of human-focused research has to go before a committee and be approved.
Make sure you're not doing the Stanford prison experiment or anything.
Right. There's a long history of this dating back basically to like the Nuremberg trials.
yeah.
That, you know, we've come very far in research and making sure that human beings are treated well in research. And so universities have this, which is a good thing, but is sometimes a lot of work to get something approved.
It's one of those things that we all, if someone were to try and get rid of it, we would be like, oh my gosh, no, this is so needed. And yet whenever we have to deal with it, we're like, oh my gosh, this is so tedious.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, if you are, you want feedback, you want constructive
Yes.
feedback, you don't want to go in there and somebody say, well, this is crap. What are you doing with your life?
Alternatively, it's not very helpful if everybody's just like, wow, great job.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you're like, well, are they just being nice? Or like, I wish they would guide me a little bit more.
No, I have a fantastic committee. They gave me really, really great feedback, every single one of them. So I'm so happy.
Good. That's really fantastic to hear. So OJ, that's how you're doing, which is like fantastic. Alicia, how are you doing?
I bet you can guess what I'm going to say.
Does it involve that time of the semester?
Yep. I just have to keep reminding myself 48 hours, one way or another, it'll be done. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm pretty sure it's not a train. Everything's going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll be fine, right? Like I understand. It always gets. I don't. Lots of people go to college, right? Lots of people do not teach at the college level, and I think as grad students, you have a very unique perspective of teaching while also taking classes, right? And so you get to see both sort of perspectives, how stressful it is at the end of the semester to have multiple projects and finals that you're prepping for. And at the same time, as a teacher, having to grade those projects and grade those finals and write those finals and everything.
Oh, I've already warned my students. I'm like, you're getting grades on like Monday because I'm going to need to finish my work and then just breathe for a minute.
Yeah. And I think, that's the thing you don't understand as an undergrad in college. You don't really get a very good perspective of just how much work it is at the end of the semester for faculty.
Yeah.
And, there's an argument, well, can you space things out? But, like, if you space things out, then you're not giving them enough time for, like, big projects that you have to sort of, like, first half of the semester lay out how to do the project, like teach the theory and everything. And then the second half of the semester is, okay, now apply that, do it.
Yeah.
So... Well, I'm glad that you are going to have the weekend to relax and like do some grading at your own pace.
Yeah. No, I think once I get through Sunday, then like next week there's multiple days that I have one thing I need to do and that's it. And I'm just like, thank you. I need this so bad.
Well, I am excited to get done with everything so that I can head out of town and go on a much-needed vacation. So that's my plan as soon as I can get out of here. Nothing against Carbondale or SIU. It's just nice
Just need a break.
Yeah, it's nice to get out sometimes. All right, well, let's jump right on into what you've been playing. And Alicia, you were teasing before we went on air that you have been playing something. What have you been playing, Alicia?
I'm still playing more PowerWash Simulator. Did have to stop for a couple of days because they updated the game, and then the level that I was on, where you're cleaning the boat, the previous update caused a glitch where none of the dirt was appearing on the boat. It looked completely clean, and like you could run the power washer on it, and it would still have the little bar going down saying like, "Oh yeah, it's getting more clean," but you couldn't see any progress that you were making.
Oh, wow.
So that put a pause on PowerWash Sim for me, and I was like, okay, it's finals week. I should take a pause. But then one of my friends on Discord was like, okay, Switch update. And I was like, Switch update? I wonder if that also fixed the glitch. And it did. So turned the game back on. Should I have been playing Switch yesterday? No. Did I play Switch yesterday? Yeah.
I think it depends how much time were you playing Switch, because like PowerWash Simulator, as we've talked about, is a great 15 to 20 minute game.
Yeah, I can't play for 15 to 20 minutes. I pick it up and it's 2 hours, and then I'm like, oh, I need to feed the cat dinner. And then I put it down and I get to work normally. But last night I had a going away dinner for several friends who are, graduating or leaving or whatever the case may be. So
I saw a picture of you on Facebook from that.
It was Elizabeth that posted it, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yep. Doesn't surprise me. It was a lot of fun.
I was scrolling through and I wasn't even seeing who posted. And I was like, hey, this picture of Alicia. I was like, Alicia didn't post that.
Yeah, a gang of us went out to Fujiyama, and it was the first time most of us have actually sat and, done the hibachi dinner thing where they do the whole show with fire and all of that fun stuff. So it was a good time.
Cool. I think the best one of those shows I've ever been to was in Disney World in like Epcot Center. And it was just great because the guy like made Mickey Mouse with the food. And then he said, oh, Mickey Mouse. And like, luckily there were no kids at the table with us. And then he just started chopping him up. I was like, this would be very traumatizing for children.
Yeah, our guy he made a heart with the meat, and then he was like, yep, we got the heart, broken heart.
Yeah, they're good showmen usually doing those.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so PowerWash Simulator, anything else?
That's really been it. Finals week. I do know I shouldn't be playing games. It's just when my brain is overwhelmed and I'm like, I need to de-stress.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fine. Like, right? If you can do it in moderation, like as a break, right? That's pretty good.
I will say that is why I do it in the afternoon instead of evening. Because afternoon, then I have to stop and feed the cat dinner eventually. If I play in the evening, then suddenly it's 1 a.m. and I'm like, what?
There is research like that. Switching and doing something different with your brain is actually really healthy for you because like you're using different parts of your brain and everything. So like it actually is relaxing to like if you're reading to stop and play a video game, or if you're writing something, stop, play a video game, or stop and read something, because you use different parts of your brain. And so you think, oh, I'm still using my brain, but you're using different parts. So it actually is relaxing.
I feel like I'm being enabled right now, and I love that.
I mean, hey, I do it all the time. I have my gaming computer right next to the computer I work at, and I'll just turn and be like, okay, I need a break. I'm going to play like 30 minutes of a video game, and I feel better, and I can go back to work.
Yeah.
So, and that's much more productive than getting up and like walking away, because if I walk away, I'm not coming back for an hour or two.
Yeah.
True.
All right, OJ, what have you been playing?
So I spent a lot of the time preparing for my Perspectives Defense, and then so mostly what I've been playing, I downloaded a Sudoku app, and I'm very bad with numbers, but this one is Killer Sudoku. The ads aren't too bad on it. Like I would prefer no ads, but it's
Sure,
it's a free app, but it's I think using a part of my brain that I don't usually use with the numbers and everything, because everything is all taken care of. And so I'm just using that to kind of zone out. And this is not video game related necessarily, but I'm rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And so I've just been zoning out.
That's the reason for the meme the other day?
Yes. Yeah. Well, generally I have a lot of memes anyway, but Buffy memes show up all the time. But it's particularly relevant right now because I'm rewatching it. Just started season 4, so I spent a lot of time just staring at that.
Season 4, which has like some of the best episodes, but also some of the worst episodes, is a very mixed bag of a season.
Yeah, and I really don't like Adam, if we're being honest. But
how you feel about Riley?
Let's see. I like Riley.
Okay.
I thought Riley was good for Buffy. And I don't know. I felt like they did him dirty towards the end of it. But yeah, I know a lot of people don't like Riley, but I thought Riley was good.
All right.
And there was a Pedro Pascal episode. The first one of season 4 has Pedro Pascal in it.
He's everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd seen that like on Twitter or something, like after The Last of Us had blown up, and somebody had tweeted out, they were like, oh, I was watching Buffy and Pedro Pascal popped up in one of the episodes. And they posted the picture, and it was like,
so young.
Yeah, he's so young looking. It's very weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. And Buffy's like interesting because it's so influential on video games. The whole like Joss Whedon, writing style and everything. Like a lot of modern video games, build off of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes much to their detriment.
Yeah.
Say what you want about Joss Whedon, but Joss Whedon is a better writer than most people. And when people try to imitate him, they fail spectacularly quite often.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So Killer Sudoku.
Yeah.
So playing that on the phone and everything.
Yep. And then just a little bit here and there while I can. And that's all I've been playing.
All right.
I'm very much looking forward to Tears of the Kingdom coming out.
That comes out tonight.
Yeah.
So as far as what I've been playing, I preloaded Tears of the Kingdom. So it is downloaded to my Switch. I can't play it.
Yeah.
I can just sit there and look at it.
Just be like, so pretty.
Yeah, it is. It's very pretty sitting there, all downloaded and everything. And it's kind of annoying. But when I go on vacation, I am taking my Switch with me. So I do plan to try to play at least a little bit of it. I never play my Switch as much as I think I will when I travel.
Yeah.
But, and I will take it. I will get some time in, I suppose. So that's the big thing for me that unlocks tonight at midnight. So I will be very excited to play some of that. But beyond that, I haven't really played much. I did play some Dead Cells. So we were talking about having something that you could quickly jump in and out. That's been kind of my thing going back to it. I finally have beat, I think, everything in that game. So I beat the Castlevania DLC. I beat all the new DLC, other stuff that was new when I came back to it. So I think I've now beat everything. I don't have all the achievements because some of the achievements are insane, which are, it's got those sorts of achievements like kill 3 of these enemies at the same time with this very particular weapon, which is all randomized. So you don't know if you're going to get it anyway.
It's Clue style.
Yeah, it is. It's very much Clue style. Kill 3 goblins in the castle
With the lamppost.
Right. There actually is like a lamppost like weapon. Yeah, I probably won't get all those achievements in this game, but I did beat all the different things, I think. I don't know that there's probably some secrets I've missed, but at least most of the big things. I think I got the big final ending to the game at this point. That's still a fantastic game, and they are at times selling it with all the DLC for like down around $20, and that's a fantastic value. So if you've never played Dead Cells, play Dead Cells. It's entirely worthwhile. All right, that does for what we've been playing. Let's move on into the news. And this is kind of interesting. Atari is releasing a game called Mr. Run and Jump. So this was originally a homebrew Atari 2600 title, and Atari has apparently, I guess, worked with the creator of that game, and they're making a version that they're going to put out onto more modern systems. And it is now all neon in like design and everything. It's a platformer very much in the style of like Meat Boy or Celeste. That sort of, I forget. There's like a certain like sub-genre title for those games, but it looks cool. Like that's the thing I gotta say. It has a really cool look to it. And the other thing I'll say about it is Atari's doing some like cool stuff lately, which is really weird to say and think because it was just like a year or 2 ago we were talking about the Atari Hotel and their baseball cap that had a speaker built into it. And you were like, what is wrong with Atari? And they did Atari 50. They're doing this. They're doing that. What's that game? The VR game, Pixel.
Oh.
You played.
Yeah. Why is this not coming to me?
Yeah, I can't think of the
We
name.
all know what game
Pixel
you're talking
Ripped?
about.
Pixel Rip, right. So they're doing the Pixel Rip 1977. That's coming out this summer, I think maybe June. And, so they're just doing some cool stuff. And, like, when you start to see this sort of stuff, you're like, okay, cool. Like, you kind of know your zone. You're not trying to make a AAA missile command game. Like, you're not going to spend $100 million making your game. You're going to make these small little kind of indie retro titles. And when you hear they're buying the rights to Bubsy and stuff, you're like, okay, that's the right lane for you to be in.
Yeah. Yep.
The world doesn't need a AAA Bubsy title. So,
are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. There are many things I'm not sure of, but that's one of them. Let's see. This kind of blew up, excuse me, on social media. GQ Magazine has made a list of the 100 greatest games of all time. They did this by polling games journalists, game developers, a quite wide assortment of different people in the industry. They basically, my understanding is, sent out emails to them asking them to make a list of their top 10 games of all time. They weighted that list with points, and then they developed a list of the 100 greatest games of all time. We're going to look at the top 10 here. The top 10 were Half-Life 2 at number 10, number 9, Dark Souls, number 8, Portal 2, number 7, Metal Gear Solid, number 6, Mass Effect 2, number 5, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, number 4, Bloodborne, number 3, Tetris, number 2, The Last of Us, and number 1, Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I guess we can talk about this top 10 list.
Well, I have some notes about the whole entire list.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay.
I do want to talk about the whole list, so let's just jump right into it.
Okay. So they even in the beginning of the article, they're like, "Hey, there's not even any of the Assassin's Creed games in the top 100." And so here are some other games and game franchises that were not listed in the top 100 of what they're saying is the greatest games of all time. There was no Smash Brothers game. Mm-hmm. There was no Mega Man game. There was no Sonic game. There was no Donkey Kong game. There was no Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre, or even really any of the good tactics type games. No Ace Attorney, no Silent Hill, no Devil May Cry, no Bayonetta.
I thought they had Silent Hill 2.
Oh, they might have. I might have missed it.
I think they
Actually,
had Silent
now that
Hill
you say
2,
that, I think they might.
but I think that was the only one they had.
Okay. No Diablo games, and it was very much all console games too, or mostly console games.
Right.
But like Candy Crush is a very, very popular game. So like I don't know. And they said there was like 672 items or something like that, and it was only the top 100. But like, that's ridiculous. And so there was 2 Souls games in the top 10, and Elden Ring was 20. And like, there's a recency bias for most of these.
I would say I was really surprised. The lack of Sonic really surprised me, and the fact that there was only 2 Pokemon games, and it was Red and Blue and Gold and Silver.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, when you look at the Pokemon games, don't get me wrong, Red and Blue and Gold and Silver are iconic. Red and Blue are held together with duct tape and dreams.
Yeah.
Like when people talk about the great Pokemon games, usually the first one on the list is Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and then honestly, a lot of people talk, Alpha Sapphire, Omega Ruby, and I'm like, these aren't on here.
And so there was one Resident Evil game. Resident Evil 4 was number 11, which I think is a travesty. Final Fantasy 7 was number 17. Final Fantasy 10 was 51. Final Fantasy 9 was 57. Final Fantasy 6 was 73. It didn't have Final Fantasy 4. Final Fantasy 14 was number 85. The only Mario Kart game was Super Mario Kart at number 90.
Yeah, that was insane.
The original.
Yeah. And it, like, Breath of the Wild being number 1 is kind of ridiculous because, like, I like the game a lot. It has the worst weapon system of all of the Zelda games, though.
I was kind of thinking, I was like, when you say it's the greatest games of all time, on the one hand, I love that it wasn't just like, we're going to put together our list of favorites and call them the 100 greatest.
Yeah.
Like, I like that they went out and asked people, but also I think it does matter that they were asking game journalists and all that. Because, like, even being someone who enjoys video games, I don't know if I'll ever play Breath of the Wild because it's too overwhelming in the open world.
Yeah.
Whereas something like Tetris or even Candy Crush, like you said, like something that is very accessible, there's an argument for that being greater.
Well, and my understanding is like, and this is from reading some journalists who posted and said, "Hey, I contributed to this," is that they were given no real
Criteria for what's great.
no real guidance. It
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, give us your top 10 greatest games of all time." Well, are you talking about most influential? Are you talking about the best to play today, the best to play in their time? Because, one of the things is there aren't very many old games on this list,
Yeah.
right? There aren't games pre-1990 basically on this list.
Yeah.
So like what you're not getting is a whole lot of like PC adventure games. You're not getting a whole lot of the Sierra or LucasArts adventure games. You're not getting TIE Fighter, like widely considered to be like one of the best PC games of all time.
I think the only fighting game at all was Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
Right. So like you're not getting fighting games, like any fighting games. You're not getting a whole lot of like competitive games, period.
Yeah.
You're not getting Pac-Man.
I know. I was like, where are any arcade games?
Right.
Yeah, so like not a lot of arcade games, but like even something like how do you make 100 greatest games of all time list and not include Pac-Man?
Right.
Yeah.
Or more to the point, one of our Mount Rushmore 4, Miss Pac-Man,
Yeah.
which is the better game, right? So, and even like looking at this top 10, it's sort of weird. Like we get Portal 2 on here.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone who thinks that Portal 2 is a better game than Portal.
Right.
Yeah, but Portal 1 was way down, like,
Yeah.
in the 60s or something.
Yeah, and so like I would rank the original, and I like Portal 2 quite a bit. I think it's a very good game, but Portal 1 is like a just fantastic from beginning to end. And I think Portal 2 suffers from its bigger length and bigger story and more mechanics and everything. And so you end up with like a very weird list. Like What Remains of Edith Finch is on this list, which is a good game, but like better than Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, I look at them, like, it blew my mind. Undertale was number 74. And I'm like, do y'all understand? Were you on Tumblr? Do y'all understand the impact that Undertale had?
Yeah. And
Like-
Link to the Past is 26 and Breath of the Wild is number 1.
Ocarina of Time was, like, stupid low.
Yeah. Secret of Monkey Island was 77. That's one of my favorite games of all time. Tony Hawk 2 was 78.
Yeah, like not having
Yeah.
a Tony Hawk game in the top 10.
Yeah.
Like there's also not really any sports games.
I'll say there's
right
no
there.
sports games. There's no, like, not even, like, Guitar Hero and Rock Band. Like, none of those real, like, family
Right.
games that you play as a group. Like you mentioned, none of the Super Smash Bros. or knockoffs of Super
Yeah.
Smash Bros. Which knockoffs shouldn't be there over, but
Right.
Yeah, where is our Nickelodeon like knockoff? Because we all
Where's
know how
our-
much we like that.
where's our multiverses?
Yeah.
Where's our Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl?
Right. And Symphony of the Night 62, Super Metroid is 60. And Rogue
Yeah.
wasn't even in there because
Symphony of the Night was the only Castlevania, and that was
Yep.
stupid low.
yeah, 62. And Metroidvania, you even mentioned, oh, hey, one half of the Metroidvania. And it's like, that's so influential with that. And
Well, I mean, you look at this top 10 list, there's not a single Super Nintendo game on here.
yep.
Right? Like, and, not that it's just sort of hard, right? Like when you have the Super Nintendo and you have Super Mario World and you have Super Metroid and you have A Link to the Past and you have like this lineup that many people view among those games one of their favorite games of all time, and not one of them made the top 10.
Yeah.
I know Kat Bailey, who writes over at IGN, she posted on Twitter, and I want to give her credit for the comment, but she said, this list really shows the insecurity of the game industry and how insecure people within the game industry are about video games because there's a prestige bias.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said, it's these very modern, very sort of cinematic sort of games that end up in the top 10. And she said,
What was our game of the year last year?
Vampire Survivors.
That wasn't on there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's some recency bias. Like,
Yeah.
are you voting for a game released in the last year? But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like some of these other
we talked
games.
about how that just was mind blowing.
Yeah, and
like that, I don't know if I would expect that to be top 10, but I would have expected it on the list.
Yeah.
As compared to some of the other things that were on the list.
yeah, I mean, that's the sort of game that might sneak on at 99, right? Like the very tail end of the list and everything, just because it's so recent. But like Kat Bailey's point was that the game industry really looks to these AAA games that they can like show to their friends, show to their family and say, see, you could play this. This isn't all Pac-Man. This isn't all, these sorts of games that are very gamey, right? And I think she has a very good point, because like when you look at a list like this, there's so I was writing a research paper this week, and I used the phrase to describe Super Mario All-Stars that it's Hegelian in nature, meaning that like video games have this idea of whatever is the newest is the best, right? Like video games are the end of history, and that we are aspiring to like whatever is the newest thing with the best graphics, the best sound is the best video game. And that's just not true.
No.
And, I get that if you're 10, but like if you're anything older than that, I think you start to realize like, okay, well, like, as you said, red and blue are not the best Pokemon. That's fine.
They're nostalgic. I love them to death. They established an incredible franchise. They're held together with duct tape and dreams.
But like in some cases, but like you also wouldn't say, what is the most recent Sword and Shield?
Violet. I wouldn't have put Scarlet and Violet on this list either.
Right. So you would say something earlier than that is, right? And I think what this list to me looks like is, okay, well, Portal 2 is the best because it's 2.
Yeah.
And it's better than Portal 1, right?
But they put Metal Gear Solid on the top 10, and Metal Gear Solid wasn't the best even in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Well, I mean, some people, but
I suppose it's the most influential, right?
Right. But then Portal 2 is not the most like.
Yeah. They don't define their terms like.
Yeah, and it was ranked choice, I think, that they did, because number one, if something was number one on someone's list, it got 10 points. If something was number 10 on their list, it got 1 point, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that ranked choice voting where there's smaller options is great. But when you have like all video games of all time, I think that might be why something like this pops up too. Like, because something could have been number 10 on everybody's list and not showed up even in the top 100.
Yeah.
But it could be, something that showed up on like as number 5 or higher on like half of the list could show up as number 1, just because there's so many options. So I think,
I know some of the journalists I read said that they voted strategically. And so they were taking games and saying, hey, I'm going to put this at number 1 because I want to try to make sure it gets on the list.
Yeah.
It's not what I think is the number 1 game of all time, but I'm voting strategically just to try to get it on the list.
Yeah.
And
I think Last of Us probably is one of those.
Yeah, well, apparently there were also several members of Naughty Dog who voted.
Okay. Yeah.
So that might be part of that. But yeah, like I think The Last of Us is a very good game.
Yeah.
Do I think it's the number 2 best video game of all time? No way.
Yeah.
No.
Like, I don't even think it's the best game Naughty Dog has made.
Right.
And so, like, I mean, there's no reason to get really upset over this. Like, that's what these lists are for. They're to generate discussion and everything. I think what worries me sometimes when I see something like this is there are people who are sort of outside this hobby who maybe occasionally play a video game, or maybe they buy an Xbox to play FIFA every year, and occasionally they'll pick something else up. And I hate for those people to be limited to like the same 5 or 10 games all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I wish they would occasionally hear about stuff like PowerWash Simulator, right? And go, oh, well, that's cool. Like, because I can see that game having wide appeal to people who don't play video games.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, and sorry, this is somewhat sexist, but it used to be that was the type of game they would say, well, girls will play this one.
Yeah.
Right? And there's some truth to that, in that it is a game that's not about violence and killing people. Yeah. And so I think
like they didn't particularly gender it in the marketing or the gameplay itself.
And so I think those games end up with this wide appeal, you know, much more than, say, Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And so they bring in that different audience, right? Which,
well, and again, like some of these games, you know, Breath of the Wild. I like gaming. I don't see myself picking up Breath of the Wild for $60 because it's just too overwhelming.
it's actually 70.
Gosh.
Well, no, it's Breath of the Wild. I was thinking Tears of the Kingdom. It's 70.
Yeah, but it's like it's too overwhelming. So like, if someone who's not particularly into gaming but is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna check it out. Like, my friend Kim just got a Switch and she picked up, I forget which Mario platformer, but she picked up one of the Mario platformers, and that is overwhelming for her because she's never been a gamer.
Right.
And so I'm like, if someone in that position was like, oh, what game should I buy? Oh, well, they say Breath of the Wild is number one. Well, let me get that then. Holy crap. You're going to have a meltdown. Like,
yeah. And I mean, you shouldn't necessarily make the list according to people who aren't gamers.
But I just mean someone. No, I'm not saying that non-gamers should have made the list, but I'm saying if you're new to gaming and you're like, okay, well, what should I check out?
Right.
And you look at this and you're like, okay, Breath of the Wild, Last of Us. Oh yeah, I know Tetris, Bloodborne, Witcher. Like, those are all very specific genre in terms of, like, you don't get puzzle games, you don't get visual novels, you don't get any of that. And so
it's a very specific audience.
yeah, that's the better word.
And and I think that's the issue, right? Like, and that's what we're kind of getting at. And I think OJ at the very beginning listing all the games, you know, franchises that aren't represented here, you start to go, okay, this isn't a very diverse list. Right?
Also, Kirby wasn't represented. I just realized that halfway through. I'm like, how do we skip Kirby?
Right. And I want to return to number one for just a minute, because I love Breath of the Wild. I enjoyed playing Breath of the Wild. But again, it has the worst weapon system of any Zelda game. And I hate any game where your stuff breaks and you have to fix it or find new stuff anyway. But having the most powerful sword in the entire universe of this game, the Master Sword, right? Once you get it, you can use it for a little bit, and then it breaks, and you have to wait 10 real life minutes to use it again.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
The Master Sword?
Yeah, the Master Sword. You have to have a certain amount of health to pull it out of the ground, so you have to get a bunch of stuff. So you're getting it pretty late in the game. You have to do a lot of stuff to get the amount of health, the heart containers that you need to get it, right? And then you pull it out, and you use it. And you can use it if you're full health. You can shoot, but then it breaks. Like it wears down and breaks. Then you have to wait 10 minutes, and then it comes back again.
And, I bet speedrunners love that.
Right. And you can pick up weapons all over the place. It's fine, but like, if I get the strongest weapon in a game, I shouldn't have to wait 10 real life minutes for it to come back again. And it's ridiculous. And I'm sure Tears of the Kingdom is going to be equally as ridiculous with the weapons, and I'm still going to play it and love it. But it should not be the number one game with a broken weapon system. And like
broken weapons and broken weapon system.
Yeah. Broken. Yeah. And then Bloodborne and Dark Souls are great games, but they're not from what I've heard from a lot of people, Elden Ring is higher than them on the list of the Souls types games.
I mean, it would be, for me at least, ahead of Dark Souls.
Yeah.
But you know, like, then that becomes a preference issue, right? Like, I'm not going to argue. I don't want to argue preference so much for me personally, just because, like, what is your favorite Zelda game? And that can be very, like, emotionally attached, right? Like, what is your favorite Pokemon game?
Blue version's still my favorite Pokemon game.
Right.
For the sheer nostalgia of it.
Yeah.
So, like, that, you know, like we can argue that and everything, and and then you run into the same issue. Like, okay, well, the number one game of all time is a game that came out, 6 years ago. How recent should games be this high on the list and everything? And when they do these for films, like when the American Film Institute and other organizations, publications do the top 100 films, they very much have a bias towards older films. So you don't see a lot of newer films on the list, and then like over time, you'll see them kind of work their way up the list.
Yeah, because they're interested in what stood the test of time.
Right, and I think that's where I kind of go back to. If I'm making the 100 greatest games of all time, looking at this list, I was thinking to myself, okay, 40 years later, we're still playing Pac-Man. 40 years later, I will still sit down in an arcade and play a game of Pac-Man. In just 10 years, we have already remastered and remade The Last of Us twice, saying that original game doesn't hold up in the same way that it once did. So in another 30 years, are we still going to be playing The Last of Us, or are we going to remake it 2 or 3 more times? Because the mechanics don't hold up and everything. And so is that one of the best games of all time then?
Yeah.
And, I think that's... I think that's why
Tetris is often number one, because you can always pick up Tetris and know what you're getting into, and like you said, 40 years later we're still playing Pac-Man. How long we've been playing Tetris? How easy it is to pick up for anybody?
Like 35 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tetris holds up, right?
Yeah.
And it's super accessible, super it's just pure gameplay. So, I mean, Tetris, I have no problem being that high on the list.
No, I think Tetris should be number one.
But yeah, I mean, so it's an interesting list. It's worth looking at, but it's certainly very much a list that's biased towards more recent games and biased towards games that would appeal particularly to people who work within the industry and people who, are journalists covering the industry and that sort of thing. So maybe not the best list for a casual person to pick up and look at. Unless they just want to know, what do diehards really like in video games? All right, let's see. The EU is reported to approve the Microsoft Activision deal next week. This is after the UK has put a kibosh on it, so... that might be some ammunition towards overturning that. I don't know.
Is this going to be like when you're on a talent show and 2 judges say yes, 1 says no, the 2, you get it, you go through?
No, I mean, I don't think I don't think it works that way. But I mean, I guess maybe they could go back and say, hey, the EU's approving this. If the FTC in the US approved it, then they could go back to the UK and say, hey, they approved it. What can we do to make you happy? Right? And then maybe that puts some pressure on the UK to approve it. Maybe the UK says, screw it, we did Brexit. We don't care what the EU thinks. EA's CEO, Electronic Arts CEO, has said that he is indifferent to the deal, which is kind of interesting to see a big third-party publisher just say, yeah, we don't care. Nintendo has said they will have no new console this year. That's not too surprising. But the announcement to the release could be short this time. So basically saying, hey, we're not announcing a new console this year, but when we do announce a new console, it may come out very quickly after our announcement. That kind of gives credence to what a lot of people are kind of expecting with this, that we could see a new console from Nintendo as early as next spring sometime.
Yeah.
And that's when Nintendo launched the Switch. That seemed to work out well for them because, of course, it sold out and you couldn't find it. But then they were able to restock by the time Christmas rolled around. And so they were, fully stocked during the big Christmas shopping season, which is ideally, I suppose, what you would want. So we might be getting a new Switch.
I'm glad I'll get at least a year out of the Switch before before they stop making games for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I think it very much depends what that new system looks like. Is it going to just be a Switch 2? Is it going to be just a more powerful version of the Switch? If it's that, then I think we'll probably get at least a few sort of cross-generational games there, particularly from third parties. Mortal Kombat has released a couple of teasers hinting at the announcement of the new Mortal Kombat game. But the most recent one that they released is of a clock, and the hands are ticking from 9 to 10 to 11, which are the last 3 Mortal Kombat games that they have released. And when it starts to tick to 12, it skips past 12 and skips to 1. So people are suspecting, because of the way Mortal Kombat 11 ended, with like Liu Kang becoming a god and basically resetting the entire universe, that Mortal Kombat 12 will actually be a complete reboot again, which they did in Part 9.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more of a sort of remake of the original Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
So because they're rebooting the entire universe, some people think it'll be a sort of multiverse take on Mortal Kombat 1, and so that we might get very different takes on classic characters. So, you might get this character suddenly a woman, or this character suddenly a good guy while they were a bad guy in the original.
Scorpion's the hero instead of Sub-Zero.
Right. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. Like, try to like mix it up in some way to surprise people, but go back to, and we're seeing this with Street Fighter 6 this summer. Them very much trying to go back to being this sort of mass market accessible fighting game like Street Fighter 2 was. And maybe this is Mortal Kombat. I don't think Mortal Kombat has ever become like a die-hard, like only for people in the fighting game community. In the way that Street Fighter V was. But maybe this is them trying to sort of reset and say, okay, we're going to make a game that's very much for the general population.
Yeah, also Mortal Kombat not in the GQ list of 100 greatest games of all time.
Yeah.
Like, that's all anybody talked about right when it came out, like with the fatalities.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I heard from anyone. And
Fatality.
Yeah.
It's more iconic than your chaos.
Yeah. Mortal Chaos.
I wonder with something like Mortal Kombat and a lot of these games, if what hurt them was, well, which one do you vote for?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so probably not a lot of people voting for Mortal Kombat 1. So you probably have a lot of people voting for Mortal Kombat 2, and then some people voting for 3, and some people voting for Trilogy, and some people voting for 11. And so maybe it splits the vote in that
That's
way.
fair. Yeah.
I don't know. That's my feeling probably for a lot of franchises.
Yeah.
Like, because I know Mario World and Mario 3 were on there, Mario 1.
Yeah.
But like, you could almost make a top 100 list with every platformer, every mainline platformer Mario game on the list. Right. Except Sunshine. Sunshine, go away.
Right.
Don't sugarcoat it. Tell us how you really feel.
Sunshine's kind of a bad game for a Mario game. I think if it's not, if it didn't have the name Mario attached to it, it would probably get more love. But I think also people would be more honest about it not being that great of a game.
Where was Mario Party on this list, too?
Yeah.
Rightfully where it belongs, off the list.
Rude.
Elden Ring, speaking of Elden Ring, has sold 20.5 million copies. So that is Pokemon territory. So good for Elden Ring. That's a pretty high achievement and everything for it. And Tears of the Kingdom, so I just saw this before we came in, is now the highest rated game ever on OpenCritic and the highest in 5 years for Metacritic. So these are both aggregate sites that bring together reviews from different places. It is getting rave reviews, lots of 10s, lots of 5 out of 5s. It seems like people love this game. Reviews just broke this morning. The game releases tonight. But like early reviews are very, very positive.
I will say though, it's one of those. It's becoming something where I'm very disappointed with Nintendo though. Like they've been, they've always been one of the companies that's bigger on doing copyright strikes on people, but they've been taking down a bunch of people's videos of playthroughs of Breath of the Wild and challenge runs and modded content. And they're doing it because they want people to be focused on Tears of the Kingdom. Mm-hmm. But it's also like, really? Like, the reason I care at all is because of Point Crow or Small Ant or whoever. And so when you're taking down their videos, you're decreasing my chances of checking out a $70 game before I drop $70 on it.
Right.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. I knew about some of the modded versions, them taking those down and stuff, like some of the multiplayer versions.
Yeah, Point Crow developed the multiplayer mod, and they copyright struck all of his multiplayer videos, and then they started going through and striking older challenge videos. He actually uploaded a separate video talking. He was like, if it sounds like I'm reading a letter, I literally am, because this is the letter that I worked out with my lawyer.
Right.
And he's like, this, some of the modded stuff, okay. But like some of these other ones you're taking down, literally follow your exact rules. I am adding my own commentary. I'm adding my own style. What do you want me to do?
Right.
Yeah. My understanding is that a lot of Japanese companies have always been very weird about online coverage of their games. So this is coming from like games journalists and everything saying, hey, we used to go to E3 and ask for like videos of their games so we could put them on their website. And they were like, why do you want to put our game on your website? Like, don't upload our game to your website. And they were like, no, we want to put a video of your game on our website. We don't want to put the actual game. We're not pirates. And that they just had a very weird attitude about it compared to American companies. And I think you see that in Nintendo.
Yeah.
That Nintendo has a very weird relationship with YouTube and with, streamers in general, where you're like, okay, I get you not wanting this unauthorized mod being promoted. But like now these people are just streaming this game. Like nobody is not
like
playing.
a lot of people are anxious about streaming Tears of the Kingdom because of these things being taken down.
Right. And like nobody's not buying Breath of the Wild because somebody is streaming it.
Right.
Like it's not that kind of a game.
That might convince me to buy it.
Right.
If I can go check out how it is.
But it's not that type of game. It's not that cinematic driven game like we were talking about, right? Like I get that much better. Like Ryan loves the visual novel games, and so I completely get if somebody was like, hey, don't stream our entire 2-hour visual novel game, right? Like you blew it and nobody will want to play it. They can just watch you. But like, you can sit there and watch Breath of the Wild for 20 hours and not get the real experience of playing that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nintendo's very weird about stuff like that. It's a shame. That ties into like their online play in addition with the friend codes and all of that. Like Nintendo's very worried that predators are going to get to children through their online system. At least that's the excuse they give. I think it's just they don't know what they're doing.
I'll say, okay, Nintendo, okay.
I get them being a little bit more conservative about it because they have that family image, right? But there has to be a happy medium there somewhere.
Like giving your friend code is not like signing up for Omegle.
Wait until the Switch 2. Just integrate it. Whenever you're playing a game, the little video pops up in the bottom corner. What will it be this time? Oh no. All right. Well, we're kind of going pretty quickly through this because we are all kind of crunched on time this week. So we are going to get right to our big question of the week. And since it is finals and everything, and we are, well, at least Alicia and I are handing out grades at this time, we thought we would talk about which franchise needs to go back and repeat a year of school. So basically, which franchise is not living up to our expectations, and do we feel like could use some work, could use going back and learning a few things from a very distinguished professor, maybe one who is currently ABD, and could teach them a thing or two about improving their product. So, Alicia, what do you think? Which franchise would you send back to a year of school?
I'm going to go with like the Nintendo Switch Sports, Wii Sports, all that stuff. You know, the ones that were on the Wii were so good. They were so much fun. You could pick them up and play them with anybody. They were very accessible. You could have a great time. They had personality. When you threw the bowling ball backwards, everybody jumped and screamed. And the Switch version is just so dull and so boring.
It's very lifeless.
Yeah, it's so lifeless. And it's like, man, you had it right. Go back to that. Go back to the beginning of that school year. Figure it out.
Right.
It feels sort of like you're playing a party game in a hospital.
You're not wrong.
It's like this very, like, everything's been sanitized.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that same spirit. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's a bad game, really, but it's a lifeless game.
Yeah. It's something that exists.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to the people who spent money on it. Because really, the Wii ones were so much better.
Yeah. All right. OJ.
So there's two that I'm thinking back and forth, but what I'm going to say is Castlevania. Because I love them, and they tried the reboot, and it just wasn't good, and then Dead Cells came out with the Castlevania pack, and it was just great, and so Dead Cells needs to teach Konami how to go back and make a good Metroidvania game. Because, like, I appreciate as times are changing and types of games are changing to keep up with that, but, like, I absolutely love the Metroidvania style, and I want that from Castlevania, and I'm not getting that. So they should go back and repeat their Symphony of the Night class a few times.
Or really maybe the Metroid side. Like they have the Vania side down. Yeah. They need to learn more from the Metroid side.
Yeah.
Konami learned from Nintendo for the Metroid side. Nintendo learned from Konami from the Vania side. Yep. Make a beautiful hybrid.
Absolutely. And I will also say that I'm looking at Final Fantasy, and I'm like, I think maybe you're going to have to go back to, because there's always the big argument of like action RPG versus like the old JRPG style and turn-based combat. And I want turn-based games. Like, even if it's not Final Fantasy, I want turn-based games, because sometimes I can't sit there and give all of my attention to it. Sometimes my dog has to go out, right? And like I can pause it, but then I'm coming back and there's just endless action that's happening everywhere, and it throws me off. And so I just like a turn-based game.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That was part of what got me out of playing JRPGs, right? As they moved away from turn-based gameplay, I was like, like, I think you and I have talked about it before, OJ, that as you move closer to Bayonetta, why am I not playing Bayonetta?
Right.
Right? Like, that's not what I ever came to these games for. Like, that was part of the appeal. And I know some of the more recent RPGs have had that, but like the big prestige ones seem to be moving, very far away from it.
Yeah.
I kind of wish, it seems like years ago we got Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which was their like sort of dumbed down American version of Final Fantasy.
But I love that game.
Yeah, I liked it very much at the time. I get now looking back at it what the issues are with it, but I sort of think maybe they would do well to do like a spin-off, right? Like do a Final Fantasy spin-off with the Final Fantasy tropes and all that, but do it in a more classic Final Fantasy style, even at a lower budget and everything. And I think there would be an audience for that. And I think the branding of Final Fantasy carries a lot with that.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
All right. So, as you know, any decent quality high school has some coach who is teaching, like social studies or psychology.
They turn on CNN Student News.
Right. Well, it was Channel 1 when I was in school. But yeah, so who's like, hey, it's Friday, we're going to watch a movie. And you're like, oh, cool, a movie about psychology? And they're like, it's Clifford the Big Red Dog. And you're like, okay, coach. But I do think those coaches could teach a thing or two to Madden football. And, like Madden football in the sort of like 16-bit era was a whole lot of fun. I enjoyed those games. I was never like as big into those games as I was into like some baseball and basketball games, but I did enjoy them. And then when we got to the PlayStation era and beyond that, Madden has just slowly lost any interest I have in it. And every once in a while I'll try to play one of the newer Madden games and I'm like, this is just, it's not fun to me. And I get to millions of people, they buy it every year and they play it every year. And I assume they're having fun with it. They're enjoying it. It's not fun to me. And I think the last football game I really enjoyed was NFL 2K5, which is coming up very close on 20 years since its release. And I don't think Madden has made a better football game than it in those 20 years. They bought out the rights to the NFL, so they couldn't make NFL 2K anymore. But I still think that's a better football game. And I wish that EA would invest the money to just like completely retool that entire franchise and figure out how to make that more accessible, more fun to play. I understand why they don't, because it's just printing money year after year. It's why we don't get a lot of reboots of those sorts of yearly franchises, because why would you, as long as they keep selling? But I feel like, it really needs some intensive work in the weight room. It needs the coach to while we're all doing worksheets, to pull it aside and say, come on, I'm going to teach you how to to get better on the field. It needs something. And so, send it back to school.
Go.
All right, that does it for this week's episode. We are, because it's finals week and because there's going to be some traveling and everything, I think we will probably be out for a week or two, and then we'll try to get back and have some new episodes. I assume we'll probably try to do some new episodes over the summer, but it might be intermittent depending on people's schedules. But we thank you for listening. As always, you can check out past episodes and other content on our website at salukigames.com. OJ, Alicia, thank you as always. And
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
How are you doing, Justin?
I'll be better when all the grading's done.
Okay, that's fair.
But anyways, everyone have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.